Good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 12th, 2021 Plan Commission meeting and Commission for Citizen Involvement. It's nice to be back in our new City Hall as the Plan Commission. I would like to call the meeting to order now. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Fisher.
Here.
Heap.
Here.
Leak.
Here.
Pape.
Here.
Semler is excused. Stewart.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum. So first on our agenda tonight is public comment. This is regarding issues not on the agenda. This is an opportunity to raise issues regarding planning. A time limit of 3 minutes per individual applies. Is there anyone who wishes to make public comment, again, regarding issues not on the agenda tonight? I see none. Excuse me, I think I jumped over our council update. Normally, Councilor Mboop gives us a council update, but tonight we're lucky to have Mayor Buck with us, and Mayor Buck will give the council update. So, thanks.
Test. Oh, there. Thank you, Chair Heap. It's great to be here with you all, filling in for Councilor Mboop while he's out of town today. Just a quick update, a few items, and then something I'm hoping that we can work on together in the time ahead. First of all, the city, in regards to our wastewater treatment plant project, the replacement of the current Portland-owned plant down in the foothills area, the city is moving forward. We're preparing to sign an engineering contract on that project, which is a large project. And I wanted to note that preliminary investigative work, so the technology that we're planning on using on that project will be the first ever in the state, so nothing that the Oregon DEQ has approved before, but it's looking very positive for their approval. That was kind of one risk going into it, but so far everything is going along really well with that project. There's additional public outreach in the form of an online open house recently took place on the Rosique Park development, and the City Council is preparing for a study session on that development in September. And I think that Chair Heap sits on the project advisory. There's a citizen project advisory committee for Rosique as well. Rosique was originally planned as a site for the tennis center way back in the day, but has since been envisioned through community engagement to be an active neighborhood park with trails, fields, picnic space, and other potential active uses such as a skate park. The development is part of the Lusher Area Master Plan, and as I mentioned, there's a community project advisory committee that's been engaged on the project. We appreciate their work. Also, speaking of parks, the city is currently right now doing outreach on the potential referral of a charter amendment that would be on this upcoming November ballot, that would add further protections to our natural parks. So that's the non-active parks. While adding those protections, we ensure that we can maintain them through best management and stewardship practices, and providing community access that then further connects all ages and abilities in our community to nature. So right now we have two online listening sessions, one taking place later this week, and then one, I think, actually a week from today. And those dates are on the city website, and the city's promoting that through its communications channels as well. And then finally, what I'd like to talk to you all about is arranging for a joint study session between you all and as members of the Committee for Citizen Involvement and the City Council sometime in the months ahead. I think as we emerge from the pandemic, been thinking that we learn new skills, on how to communicate with one another. And recently, some of you all and members of the community, members of the City Council, we interviewed well over 100 folks for positions on advisory boards. Huge turnout, which is great, to see. But lots of questions, people are asking about, well, how will the meetings be in person? Will there some kind of like a hybrid format, And so we're just seeing, it's great to see so many folks from so many different backgrounds, but folks who are working, folks who are parents, folks who have all different, schedules and timeframes, but they still want to be involved. So just a chance for all of us kind of get together and think about what are some, best engagement and communication practices, going forward, and are there things that, we learned through the pandemic that maybe get us to think about a different way. As a city, we've been very traditional. We just, have one kind of a meeting and all of that, but in some ways that may have been precluding certain people from participating and in the city. So we want to enhance that as much as we can. And then in general, I think it's good if we can contemplate how we can use new technology and other emerging best practices to just in general enhance community engagement, get information out to the community. There's always, I would say, so much going on in the city. It is hard for me to know what all is going on the different advisory boards, different projects, and what stage they're at. I think there's always ways that we can enhance that information. So it'd be good to have a get together as we're supposed to do once a year and talk about it. Okay. Any questions?
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mayor Buck?
Okay. No. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for the update.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda is the Commission for Citizen Involvement general updates. I did have one update from the neighborhood associations. The Lake Forest Neighborhood Associations invites their members for the election of officers and board members meeting. It's going to be held Thursday, July 22nd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. At Waluga Park West Pavilion. They're asking that those that are interested can bring a dessert for their dessert potluck. And they announce it'll be an informative evening covering the following important business. Mayor Buck, who we just heard from, will be available to meet there. They'll elect the officers and board members. They'll talk about emergency preparedness updates and the affordable housing proposal for the Boones Ferry project staging area. So again, this is the Lake Forest Neighborhood Association meeting, Thursday, July 22nd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. at the Waluga Park West Pavilion. Hope anyone interested can make it there. And I did have one other request for the Commission for Citizen Involvement, and Mayor Buck touched on it, but we did receive feedback, Commission received feedback saying for the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee that they felt like it was a very important committee meeting, and just as Mayor Buck was saying, they found it very valuable when our Plan Commission meetings were held on YouTube, that they were able to watch it. And then also they were mentioning the Rasik Park project that's going on. Those committee advisory meetings have been also broadcast on YouTube, and they said that was very valuable. So we did get an official request to see if the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee meetings could be on YouTube. Maybe that's something we'll have to look into and come back.
Chair Heap, I'd be glad to look into that. And I know that we were planning on having an open invitation or the ability for people to be in the meeting, although it's on Zoom, but we'll look into the possibility of also broadcasting. I don't know if we'll be able to, it depends on where we're holding the meeting, but we'll look into it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think hopefully I didn't use a bad wording there. I think they were intending broadcasting or recording that they could go back later and watch,
Absolutely,
on YouTube.
the meeting,
Doesn't
we intend to
necessarily
record the meetings.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Commissioners, any other comments for the Commission for Citizen Involvement? None? All right, now we'd like to move on to our public hearing. This is a continued hearing. It's the Community Development Code and Comprehensive Plan map and zoning amendments to the Boones Ferry staging area, LU 21-0019. Only persons that had signed up to testify for the hearing on June 14th, 2021, but were not called upon to speak will be given the opportunity to testify orally at the meeting. A list is available at the land use webpage. It's listed on our agenda tonight under the project section, and you search for LU 21-0019 and then press submit. Written testimony may be submitted by any person before tonight's meeting. This is a request from the City of Lake Oswego for Community Development Code amendments to allow multifamily housing as an allowed use in the WLG-OC zone, limited to the Boones Ferry construction staging property, the southwest corner of Boones Ferry Road and West Sunset Drive. It's subject to affordable housing criteria and allowing a 5-foot height increase for multifamily development that is at least 80 feet from all R7.5 zone properties. and amendments to the comprehensive plan map and zoning map to reclassify approximately 0.10 acres from the WLG-RMU to the WLG-OC and approximately 0.15 acres from WLG-R2.5 to WLG-OC. The properties are located at 5126 and 5110 West Sunset Drive and 16719, 16731 to 16745 and 16759 Boones Ferry Road. No actual development is proposed at this time. The staff coordinator is Director Scot Siegel, Planning and Building Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
As far as the hearing procedure tonight, and on the risk of being somewhat repetitive, but just to make sure everybody's clear, the Planning Commission held oral testimony at its last meeting. We did not finish those people who had signed up. Thus, we continued the public hearing in order to pick up those people who have not yet been able to testify. So that's the reason why people are limited to those people who are on the list who can orally testify. However, it was also requested that the record remain open for additional written testimony by anyone, and that also occurred. So any person could submit written testimony up until, I think it was noon today, per the published notice on the, as announced and then as published on their webpage. And we have received additional written testimony, G131 through G137. Those are in support. And in opposition, G254 through G256. So we're going to go ahead and take the follow-up oral testimony, and then we'll be asking whether any person wishes to submit rebuttal information, written rebuttal information to the new evidence in G1, any new evidence in G131 through G137, or G254 through G256. So that's kind of a short overview, and then following that will be the procedural questions to persons about the rebuttal, and then whether the applicant wishes to file a final written argument. And at that point, depending on the results of those, the commission may proceed to deliberation tonight if both of those are no, but if either of those answers are yes, so that additional evidence or a written argument is to be received, then the commission would continue the public hearing again and deliberate once those materials are received. So that's the brief overview. Okay. So with that, for those persons who are eligible to testify tonight, I will again read the hearing procedure to remind them. This land use request is based on the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria that staff identified as applicable to the request. It was available online. You must identify any applicable criteria you believe additionally applies. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable criteria. We ask that you specifically identify to the commission the criteria or standards you are addressing, so the commission may consider your testimony in relation to the criteria or the standards that you're addressing. If you do not identify the criteria or standards you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're testifying about, and may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise any constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes action for damages in circuit court. The public hearing process will be, since we're picking up sort of in the middle of things, we'll be having testimony by, I think there were 3 persons who were not called upon who wanted to testify in support of the application. Then we'll pick up with the persons who are listed in opposition, and then finally those persons who are neither for nor against. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, except to the applicant, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. And following the oral testimony would be the applicant's oral rebuttal, which would be up to 5 minutes. And then before commission deliberation, as I indicated, we'll then poll on the question of request for written rebuttal evidence or written final argument. Depending on the answer to that, we may move to commission deliberation. The time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of or which is part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed the persons are testifying on their own behalf unless they expressly identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. A potential conflict of interest declared on behalf of each of the Planning Commission members to the extent of their business or employment. We'll strike that, that's for DSC only. So at this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts since the last meeting. You don't need to declare any prior to your prior declaration. If you've had any site visits since your last meeting, if you've developed a new bias on the application, and if you have any financial conflicts of interest to declare. So if you could lead off.
I have had no ex parte contacts. I did visit the site last evening. I parked and walked up Sunset Drive, up Bonaire, and down Madrona, and just kind of observed the general conditions of the area. What else am I saying? No financial conflict.
Ms. Lee?
No financial conflict, no ex parte. I'm familiar with the area and the neighborhoods surrounding it, having sold homes in there, but have not visited recently.
And no bias on the application?
None.
Thank you. Chair Heap?
Yeah, I've had no ex parte contacts. I've had no site visits, but I do use the professional services in that area and some of the office buildings over there. I have no financial conflicts of interest and no bias. Also, Attorney Boone, I'd like to declare at this time, in our previous meeting, there was a glitch in the network where I lost connectivity and dropped out of the Zoom meeting. Subsequent or after the meeting, I reviewed the entire testimony by Carolyn Krebs in its entirety and covering the time that it dropped. So I'd like to put that into the record that I was able to view the drop section since the last meeting.
Thank you, Chair Heap. Mr. Pepe?
I have made a site visit, walking around the neighborhood. No ex parte conversations, no bias, no financial at all.
Mr. Fisher?
The same. I had no financial interest, no ex parte contest, no visits, and no bias.
All right. Is there any challenge to Commissioner's right to consider the application? Hearing none, then we'll go ahead and pick.
Mr. Boone, I have one.
Oh.
Sorry. I wasn't at the last hearing,
Okay.
but I just wanted to put on the record that I did review the tape in its entirety. So I don't know if I was supposed to say
and the
that or not.
exhibits? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Chair, I believe you have a list of the persons who have
Correct.
signed up for oral testimony?
Yes.
And we'll start with those persons who were in support but were not called upon. I think in one case, we didn't send the link to the person, so that was omitted. It was on Zoom. And another time, the person's name was not the same as what was on the screen, and so they weren't called. And the third time, they started to testify. They had technical glitches. We said we'd get back to them. We didn't. So with that, if you'd go ahead and call them.
Thank you, Attorney Boone. So I would like to call our first person tonight to give testimony in support, Carrie Bloom. Is there Carrie Bloom present? None. Next is Mike Buck. Don't have Mike Buck with us. Next would be Ken Sandblast. No Ken Sandblast. So Attorney Boone, that was all the individuals that we had who had indicated they would like to give testimony tonight. With that, I think we move on to continue those in opposition. So we'll pick up from where we left off. And again, this is for folks who want to give testimony in opposition. So I'll start with Lynn Andrews. Ms. Andrews is not present. Shari Andrews? Not present. Michael Bearwagen? Michael, if you'd like to come up to the desk, state your name and address for the record, and then please give your testimony.
Council members, my name is Michael Beerwagen. I live at 16317 Bon Air Avenue. Was not aware of my name being on a list to participate verbally tonight, but I'd be very happy to just share my feelings about this. It's many people in our neighborhood are very nervous about this potential structure coming into our area, adding tremendous amount of traffic in an area where there are no sidewalks, very difficult for children to maneuver, places to play, and it's a very bad idea for that location. Personally, I'm not against having any kind of high-density housing for anyone that would like to live in the city. My wife and I have moved here. We love the city, have partaken in many of its wonderful events and activities that are available here. But we're very concerned about that location. There was the 2 or 3 of you drove on, I heard you say West Sunset. You have to go very slow on West Sunset because of the difficulty with the unevenness of the road and the potholes and the gravel, and it's a very slow-moving road. It's not a good spot for adding 80 to 100 cars. I hope that the council respectfully does not jam this down our throats as the people who live in this neighborhood. It's very concerning to me that we have 2 city entities. One of them is the applicant, one of them is the one making the decision. It's concerning to me that both of them are the city. I appreciate you guys tonight saying that you don't have a bias toward this happening. I'd really like you to consider this location as being a very bad location for adding all these people, cars, and children. I appreciate you listening to me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Sorry, my Commissioner Leek.
Do you have a number of units that would be comfortable on that site?
I am not prepared to make any statements with that. I've done no research to consider that, no.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Really appreciate you coming out tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next on our list was Sheila Beerwagen. Sheila, no? All right. Next is David Bice. So David Bice. I don't see David. Kevin Bruni. Good evening, Kevin. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record and then give your testimony.
My name is Kevin Bruni. I live at 16315 Inverurie Road. I am not affiliated with or speaking on behalf of an organization. I am in opposition to this application, and I'm in opposition to this rezone and agree with the prior testimony from the prior meeting as well as this evening that there are other properties better suited. At a minimum, I request that the Planning Commission decline to make a decision until the rezone is accompanied with a formal development proposal and complete application is submitted. I do question, as the gentleman noted a moment ago, that both the city is the applicant and the approver. At the start of the meeting, the attorney, Bodie, suggested that the commission could not infer the policies that we were referencing in our objection. Yet throughout the application, the staff report notes that the application narrative does not address the policy though the staff finds the proposal meets this policy. My question is how many third-party applications where the narrative does not meet the policy, the staff provides that level of deference and still approves the application? My other concern is that we're being asked to approve the rezone without knowledge of the development, without knowing the number of units that will ultimately go on to the land, without knowing the amenities, without knowing the layout. It's hard for us to understand the impact. And by asking us to approve it without the development proposal, we actually will lose our voice. Once the rezone is complete and a developer comes in to propose something, the staff can easily defer our concerns by simply stating the development proposal meets the zone. It is unfair to ask us to approve this rezone without knowing the development. You would not agree to the purchase of a home where the builder said, I'll build four rooms, 3 bathrooms, come back in 4 months and I'll show you what it looks like. I have nothing further to say.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? None? Thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Next is Sally Croft. Ms. Croft, would you like to state your name and address for the record, and you go ahead and give testimony?
Sally Croft, 5190 West Sunset Drive.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. You may give your testimony.
I've been in the neighborhood since 1992. When I moved in, there were very few families there. Since then, the area has blossomed with children, families. The children love to play. They've made friends with each other. The negative as far as rezoning the corner property is that if it is used for multiple housing, multiple complexes, it adds more people to this, more cars to the street, more traffic up and down Sunset. I counted 25 cars going past my house in one day because of the construction on Boones Ferry. I hear the construction all night long. Some cases it starts at 3 in the morning and sometimes it doesn't end until 3 in the morning. So it's been a very negative, and I feel the city is trying to recoup monies that they should not have spent on that area for staging in the first place. What would be much better would be to create a space with a buffer along Boones Ferry where people could walk and sit and enjoy themselves and enjoy our streets, because I can't tell you the number of people that come from other areas and park their cars further into the Lake Grove area and walk, just observing, just enjoying themselves. And if we put a larger complex on that corner, it takes away from that, besides taking away the place that the children love. I think that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for your testimony and coming out tonight. Commissioners, any questions? See none. Thank you. Next is Brenda Descombe. No, Ms. Descombe. We'll move on. Kathy Godinez. Good evening, and thanks for coming and giving testimony. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record, and go ahead and give testimony.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for listening to us. My name is Kathy Godinez. My address is 5078 Southwest Madrona Street. I also work in Lake Grove. I'm in the building that's behind the Shell station. Anyway, I'm coming out tonight just for a couple things. I mean, I agree with what's been said so far, so you don't want to reiterate that. But one of the questions I have is, and that I don't understand, is why this rezoning was revisited after the West Lake Grove Design District Plan. It's kind of a mouthful. It's my understanding that it took about 3 years to develop, and people agreed on it, and it was a good plan. And so I don't know why it was revisited, this particular spot. On this spot, there's already housing available. There's townhouses on two sides of it. And so adding more, I think, would be really a disservice to the area and to the people that live there. I do agree that I think there'll be at least a minimum number of 80 cars there, and there's 68 parking places. So the overflow of the residents and their visitors is going to go on Sunset. And Sunset can't handle 40 more cars. I mean, it just can't. And so the other thing that I would like to just note is, I don't know, Jan Steinbeck, she wrote a really nice opinion in opposition of it, and I just want to note for the record that I agree with her, and many residents do too. And she outlines all of this in a very, really clear and thoughtful way, and there are other properties available in the area that could handle a complex like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, which other properties are you talking about?
Well, I don't know specifically. I can find out for you. I was just reading her statement, and she mentioned it, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But I do have a copy of her opposition. I can leave it with you. Okay.
All right, thank you. No further questions. Next is Steve Glazer. Mr. Glazer? No Glazer. Right. Next is Greg Heath. Mr. Heath. Nick Heath. Good evening, and thanks for coming out and giving testimony tonight. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Nick Heath. I live at 5284 West Sunset Drive, and I don't have anything specific to say. Me and my family don't agree with it, and I have 3 young daughters that ride up and down the street on their bikes and play with all the other children that you've heard about, and I've stopped my kids from getting hit, and obviously the biggest thing is vehicles, and there's blind spots, and there's big potholes, and it's all the cars going up and down. It's just not gonna work. And that's all, other than agreeing with everyone else.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Commissioners, any questions? None? Thank you. Next on the list is Brian Linkfield. Mr. Linkfield? No? Dara Linkfield? Good evening, Ms. Linkfield. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record and give your testimony.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm Dara Linkfield. I live at 5276 West Sunset Drive. And I agree with everything that's been said tonight. And the main thing that I was concerned about is that the agreement that the Neighborhood Association and the West Lake Grove Design Project and the Lake Forest Neighborhood Plan and the city had, I feel like those are really important things and agreements, and any change to that is sort of a proposed change is losing trust between city and neighborhoods. And I agree that Jan Steinbeck wrote a really great letter and said that really eloquently and beautifully, and I agree with, I think it'd be beneficial for you to look at that also. I also agree with the traffic, the high density in that neighborhood would have a huge effect on just it's not a very big neighborhood, like people say. There's no sidewalks, the streets are pretty small. Increasing traffic flow would be detrimental. And I also think that it would be great to see from the city a long-term plan for affordable housing. I think it's great that we're working on that, but I think it would be great to see how we think we might address that in a big way for the whole city, and not just trying to maybe plug one hole with the Band-Aid. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? None? Thank you for coming out tonight and giving your testimony. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next is Andy McCoon. Sure, Mr. McCoon? Oh, no. Ginger McDowell? Ms. McDowell? No. Tracy McFadden? Good evening. Thanks for coming out and giving testimony. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record, please.
Tracy McFadden, 5309 West Sunset Drive.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I'd like to say I'm in full agreement with everybody that doesn't want this to go through. I'm a contractor. I've built a home on West Sunset, as Dara has also, and as Jesse has also. And as a contractor, we're made to jump through every single hoop and abide by every order and every code that's established. When I built my home, I wasn't asking for much, but the red tape I had to go through to get that approved took over 6 months because I'm in the city and not on I'm on a septic system. That being said, the original project to develop Bank of the West and Sunset Crossing and the Renaissance homes was all approved years ago. And I'm just wondering, why is it okay to completely get rid of the old plan that was already approved by other planners and put a spot on the map where you can shove 54 units in to appease maybe a check mark, a check in the box? I don't really feel it's the planning department's job when acquiring a piece of property to be able to rezone it at their own accord to their own specs versus selling it on the open market and letting a developer come in and then having the developer determine what he needs to change to get that development installed in that area. 54 units on that corner is going to be the only residential housing unit from the freeway up to Mountain Park that is actually on Boones Ferry besides the 2 original structures that are still there from the 30s. It'll be the only structure. The noise from the train and traffic is on a 3-story building. You're not going to be able to block that. It's going to be noisy. And it's a bad situation to put low-income housing in. I mean, it's going to be a horrible spot. There's no good spot to put there. The Sunset Crossing development is a perfect substitute. You can put 14 units there and use the light commercial up front, just like it is at Sunset Crossing. Nobody has a problem with that if it be low income. The density is just way too high. The facility is not going to be able to handle it. There's nowhere for the kids to go that move in there. There's nowhere for them to play. There's definitely not enough parking. They're going to be parking all up and down Sunset in front of our yards. I mean, no family of 4 these days, they usually have 2 working parents, they need 2 cars. Not each unit is just going to have 1 car. There's not nearly enough. I feel the old plan that was developed with the Sunset Crossing should just be maintained. I don't think any height variance should be allowed. I wasn't allowed height variance when I built a home, and neither were the other people around us. Why is it that just one spot, it would be okay to go up another 5 feet so low-income housing can have 9-foot ceilings? 9-foot ceilings aren't even in our homes. That's a luxury thing. These are supposed to be low-income housing places. Shouldn't be any higher, 3 stories was never part of the game, if you ask me. The property should be sold on the open market to a developer that jumps through these hoops, just like I had to. That's only fair, and if you guys are holding all the cards, it just doesn't seem like our voices are getting heard, it's too dangerous. It's gonna be loud, uncomfortable, and they're gonna be stigmatized as the people who live in the low-income apartments at the edge of town by the railroad tracks. I mean, they make country songs about that. It's just not fair to them. They got to be in a good environment. There's plenty of open lots around where you can diversify that housing. There's some down on Pilkington. There's right across the street on Boones Ferry. There's a giant open lot there that's been open since I've been on the neighborhood for 22 years. Nobody's decided to build there. It needs to be diversified, squatted down to 2-story at the max, and lower density. Give them some green space. It just can't be shoved down the throat like that. I mean, it's not fair to them. It's a stigma. And that's about all I got.
Thank you. Commissioners, Commissioner Fisher, question?
This is not directed at you, all right? It's directed at an argument you're making that other people are making, which is there's an existing plan and the city shouldn't change it. Is that a fair?
Yes.
So, all right, is it the position that once the city has made a decision that it should stay forever and never change?
No.
Okay, and the second part is you said a private developer could come in and decide what they want. How would that be different than the city saying, here's what we want?
Because right now, the zoning there is for what it was for Sunset Crossing, you know, office commercial with residential behind. There's nothing wrong with that. Even if it's low income, that's fine by us. But the 54 units is way too many. There's just no room to jam that many people, that many cars up and down Sunset. If you come out to our neighborhood, everybody, before you vote on this, should come to our neighborhood and walk Sunset. You tell me, when the train comes and blocks up traffic up and down Boones Ferry, they cut up Sunset 40, 50 miles an hour sometimes to try to get up to Bon Air, to cut through Lake Grove, Lake Forest Avenue, to get onto the freeway or get across the bridge, just so they can get the other side of town. It backs up all the way to the freeway sometimes because there's 2 railroad crossings. I've hit the same one from Tualatin all the way up to my house. It took me 45 minutes to get from S&H, not S&H, but Grimm's back to my house. 45 minutes because I hit that train 3 times. You know, it's not a good situation. It's going to be loud. I wouldn't want to live in the 3rd floor of that thing with the train coming through. No way. You need it has to be quality space. Even if it's low income, it needs to be quality space where the kids can have a good little green space. There's not too many people, and we can still enjoy our neighborhood also, and they could be walking up and down because it's narrow. It's 1 lane of barely paved road and gravel on the sides. And a lot of people have teenagers that have cars, so they park outside the driveway. When someone else comes one way, you got to get off to the side, let them through, and then you go. I mean, it's a fire hazard, actually. You know, something happens, something starts burning, you got little scars, someone tries to block the road. It's not pretty. It can be quite dangerous.
Vice Chair Pepe?
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding when again, not specifically directed at you, are indicating there's land elsewhere, or making the argument with the train and the noise. Pretty much anywhere in Lake Oswego, in that general area, you're going to hear the train, whether it's there or down on Pilkington or even across the street, at that land that's been vacant for quite a long time, and nobody has identified that as a place to put any type of housing. Nobody's come in and actually built anything. There might be, I think, 2 or 3 homes being built a little further north of that vacant land. What is the number of units?
I think I got a good answer for that. I've been thinking about it a lot. 14 units, just like what's next door on Sunset Crossing. Those are beautiful condos. Private home ownership, it costs less than a house with all the land. It does solve part of an issue. 14 to 16 condos. What's wrong with that? And you have the office commercial up front. Same facades, keeping up the appearance of how Lake Oswego, how we want it to look, is fine. Because just like across the street at Sunset Crossing, there was a few kids in there a while back, but when the medical build and all the office people take off, man, kids are riding their bikes and skateboards in that open parking lot. So they got a pretty good space in front of them, and there's far more than 68 parking spaces in that area. I don't know if it equates in size to the 1.38 acres proposed, but it's still quiet for them because the 2-story office building does block some of that Boones Ferry noise for them. And that would be pretty much the same for across the street at the proposed site, where you get the office commercial that's vacated in the evening, not there 24/7, 365 like the apartments would be. I think that'd be a much better choice. And it's already approved, it's already been studied. I don't think we have a true traffic study done on this proposal yet. You know, there's been a study of a daycare and a diner. That's not 24/7, 365. You know, we're talking about possibly 150 people on that site now with multiple cars. It's too dense. It needs to be lightened up and spread around a little bit more. Right across the street on Boones Ferry, there's been vacant land there since I moved into Sunset 22 years ago. There's a dilapidated red house that's a big open space, and then you got the little Lynn Panis, construction office, and behind him, they tore down a bunch of houses back there. I think they tore down 3, and that's open space. I mean, who owns that? I mean, can we do something over there and diversify it and make it more equitably stretched out throughout the community instead of just pigeonholing all these people into one spot and calling it good? We got low-income housing in Lake Oswego. It just doesn't make sense that way.
But then we're getting closer to the railroad tracks.
We're already right on them, like you said. You said it doesn't matter what part of the neighborhood we go to, we're gonna hear it, sure. We're still on the same plane, we're just right across the street on Boones Ferry. It's actually a little bit further from the tracks, but it's downhill, which sound goes up, so they're gonna get a little bit less sound down in there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you for coming out tonight and giving your testimony.
Thank you.
Next on the list is John Morris. Mr. Morris. Next is Patricia O'Brien. So Ms. O'Brien. Kylie Schultz. Mark Smith. Thank you for coming out tonight, Mr. Smith. If you'd like to state your name and address for the record, and go ahead and give your testimony.
Yeah, Mark Smith, 5173 West Sunset. We live kitty corner to that property. I'm opposed to the Boones Ferry multifamily housing project. You know, this has been a real emotional roller coaster for us because we've had to live through the construction, which has already impeded our judgment, kids not sleeping. That property just frustrates us to all get out. I mean, it's been a complete disruption in our lives since it started. Now we're talking about, you know, and a lot of this is a lot of reiterating, and I feel it's important to reiterate a lot of the points that have been made, and I love a lot of the detail that Tracy brought in too. I think it's inappropriate for the location. I think 54 families is, 54 units as I understand it, is just far too many. And it goes down, it ties back to the parking spillover. I mean, our house, if you go down, it's the one, you know, if the property is there going down Sunset, ours is right there. Our house is right on the street. So the spillover, I'm not sure, I don't know where it goes. I mean, our house is right on the street. You know, our neighborhood, it feels that, you know, if I look back, it feels like it's been neglected for years. The potholes, and I know my wife's put in, you know, a lot of calls to the city and trying to get it paved, and the potholes it's horrible. You can't possibly drive down that road more than 10 miles an hour without, you know, losing your spoiler. But yet cars, you know, as already been said, cars cut through and they drive too fast. And there are kids all over the place, which is a joy, but it's also scary as hell to see that, you know, some of these cars just driving so fast. It's almost, I hate to say, an accident waiting to happen. But if we build in more children on that street, I mean, it's great, but it's just more problems, and it's nerve-wracking. I just don't know how you widen the street. I don't know how you make it safe for that. You know, now you want, let's see. And then, you know, the safety, whole safety issue, I guess it keeps resonating in my head. It's almost illogical. It's just the safety, the numbers that want to go on that street over and over. It's scary, it's frightening for all of us. You know, what about the families that move into that development is another question I have. I mean, many of us, I've lived in Manhattan, I've lived in Chicago, downtown, I've lived in multi-family buildings for a good chunk of my life. Many of us moved out, moved to Oregon. I mean, I love this state, and I love how spread out it is. And then I start seeing some of this development. It's like, oh my God, what's happening? And it's frightening because I don't want to see it. You know, the question gets asked, what's the right number? I don't have the right number. I mean, 12, 6, 4, none. Me, I'd like to see a dog park put there, but I don't know that that's an option at this point. You know, I think it's keep it to a minimum. I mean, I just know that 54 is far too many for all these reasons. And talking about, you know, I heard last time the parks, you know, where are the kids going to go play? And I know I'm jumping all over the place, but that's the way it feels. That's the way it feels. It's like, how can the city do this? It just doesn't make any sense. We're not opposed. I don't think I've heard any arguments against affordable housing, and we're there as well. But a plan, spread it out a little more, and that just makes so much sense to me. Thank you for your time.
Questions, commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Stewart?
So just to clarify, the disruptions that you're currently experiencing, that's the staging equipment moving in and out? That's okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next is Amy Valentine. No, Ms. Valentine. Next is Tanya Villalobos. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name. No, Tanya. Tim Webb. Alma Wong. Excuse me, if there's, if you're Alma Wong, if you'd like to come up and make a statement, you may do so at the desk.
Oh, okay. I was told that if I didn't sign up on Zoom last meeting, that I couldn't.
Your name was officially added to the list.
Oh,
Yeah, I think they
okay.
recognized you, so
I didn't
you're
prepare.
free to speak. If you state your name and address for the record, then go ahead.
Alma Wong at 5283 West Sunset Drive. And I'm opposed to this development based on the density parameters that are being proposed or made codified through the zoning issue. And I agree with everybody else that has spoken. It's the safety issues, the streets, conditions, and there's no green space for all these families that are going to move into 54 units where these children are going to play. They can walk outside their door and look at a parking lot. And that's it. That was, I think there was a sketch the city had put out, and was 68 parking spaces and a 3-story building. That was it. And I can't remember, but I thought the buffer seemed inadequate for that area between the old residential neighborhood and that was proposed. And basically, that's the gist of my testimony.
Well, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Fisher?
This is a question that, again, it's not you, it's a lot of people have raised it. It says that there's no place for the children to play. Where do the current children play?
In the streets where the cars zoom by, that uses the diversionary road to bypass the trains. Boones Ferry, construction. If you've lived through the construction, you'll see people not from the neighborhood, they use that as a bypass, and they do not respect the speed or the condition of the road. And there's multiple small children, 2 years, that are running around the streets here. I mean, I've been here 32 years, and we did not have a family neighborhood because we're all older, middle-aged at the time, The kids have grown up, and probably the last 6-7 years, there's been a population boom of little kids. First time I've seen that in all the years I've lived here. And it's expanded all the way to Bonaire, Oak Ridge, all the side streets that hit this area. There's and we had a little parade the other day, which we haven't seen in years because I think they closed down the Lake Forest Parade for the 4th of July, and we were out walking on Bonaire. There must have been 24 little toddlers running through, and I don't even know where they came from. But they had their own little parade that the neighbors had set up, and they had big little 4th of July party with their little bikes and little scooters and all that. I mean, that's all been in the last 7 years. You know, all the elderly people are still living there, slowly moving away or dying, but, you know, they're all replaced with these young families. And like I said, I've been there 32 years, and this is the last 7 years, the first time I've ever seen little kids. There was only Tracy's kids, and they're pretty new too, and Gary's kids, that was it. And that was only probably in the last 15 years. There was just 2 families here. But anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Swan. We do have another question, Commissioner Leek.
You say that the children ride their bikes in the street, and I understand that's what kids do, but the people on West Sunset also have yards where their children can play, and they can be fenced for their dogs and a safe environment for them. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, if you can harness little kids, I mean, I had my girlfriend's little girl once and paying at the grocery store, and she disappeared on me. That's a scary feeling.
But there is space.
There is space, but we don't have fenced yards. A lot of people don't have fenced yards. I mean, I guess if you're really recluse and sort of don't want your neighbors tromping through your yard, you know, we're sort of a friendly neighborhood. Nobody has big fences in our neighborhood, unless you want us to safeguard everybody's child. I guess that's not the way I would raise a kid, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate you giving testimony. Thank you. Catherine Nguyen? Ms. Nguyen, if you'd like to state your name and address for the record, then go ahead and give your testimony.
My name is Catherine Nguyen. I live at 4851 Madrona Street. For those of you who have not yet visited the site, that's about a block away from the proposed construction along Boones Ferry. Now, I oppose the amendment allowing residential use in the Westlake Grove office commercial zone. I believe it violates policy A1 and A2 by negatively impacting surrounding properties and creates adverse traffic impacts. I find this proposal misleading in its representation of the proposed community, the so-called traffic survey, and specifically creating an exception to established zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Ms. Nguyen? None? Commissioner Fisher, sorry.
I guess I'm confused. You say an exception to the zoning. Aren't they changing the zoning? So they're saying...
I'm opposing the amendment
Right.
that they're asking to change the zoning. Currently, we're trying, this proposal is to change all of the properties within the lot to the Westlake Grove office commercial zone, which would not allow for any residential use. So the amendment that's part of this is requesting that it be made to allow it as an exception, but it would not allow any other commercial zones in the area to have residential use. So it would be an exception.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Thank you for giving your testimony tonight. So that concludes everyone who was on the list in opposition. So with the concurrence of the attorney, I'd like to move on to those that are neither for nor against. And we'll start with Victoria Dunn. Is there a Miss Dunn? No? Ann Bikukla? And those were the only 2 names that we had for the list that were neither for nor against. So that concludes the oral testimony tonight. Attorney Boone, shall we move on to the applicant's oral rebuttal?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the applicant will have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Heap, members of the Planning Commission, Scot Siegel, representing the city as the applicant, and with me is Frank Angelo with Angelo Planning. We'll keep our comments brief here. I understand we have 5 minutes, is that correct?
Correct.
So just wanted to start off by saying that the city does have a plan for approaching affordable housing, and if anyone is interested in it, the planning department can fill you in on that. The council has held a number of study sessions over the years on affordable housing, and this proposal, which was initiated by the council's direction, is consistent with that approach. First on traffic, as was described in the application and in the staff report, trip reduction is no greater under the proposal to add multifamily housing than under existing uses allowed in the OC zone. Neighborhood trips and patterns of travel, including distribution of trips during peak periods, is no greater than what would be allowed under the existing code with office, retail, restaurant uses. WLG requires that developments connect with one another and manage access on to adjacent streets to reduce dependence on any one street. So there would in fact be a requirement that future development on the site connect to adjacent parcels and provide access or egress on the Boones Ferry Road. Traffic wouldn't be routed directly or exclusively through West Sunset Drive. A traffic impact study will be required for any future application for any development if it meets the code criteria for traffic impact study, which in the study that was presented, that size of a project would require a traffic study. We believe the criteria for the zoning amendments are met with regard to traffic. With regard to alternative sites, as proposed, or as presented in the application and the staff report, it's not feasible to develop a multifamily community of this size or the size that would be permitted by the zoning amendments on any other site in the city without rezoning, assembly of lots, and redevelopment of existing buildings, possibly requiring demolition of existing housing. Similar findings could be made. The Planning Commission could make findings similar to the findings that it made in approving the Merrillhurst Comprehensive Plan and Development Code amendments, which added multifamily use as a permitted use to the IC zone in LU 20-0016. The property that was mentioned in one of the written comments that you received that Habitat for Humanity is pursuing, and that property is currently privately owned. It's not before you, obviously, and it would not meet the same housing need. Habitat for Humanity typically builds a for-sale product, a single-family home, or in some cases townhomes, typically without supportive services, and again for home ownership. What's envisioned on this site, pursuant to the MOU approved by the City Council, is a rental housing for rent housing, and the city's working in partnership with Clackamas County Housing Authority and Metro to make that happen. The city as a public body can control the sale and development of this property in ways that a private property owner cannot. So a lot of the concerns that you've heard tonight in terms of what I would consider to be off-site impacts, potentially, or off-site concerns in terms of road conditions in the neighborhood are legitimate concerns. We're aware of the road conditions in the neighborhood, and those concerns would best be taken up through the capital improvement program. And I know the city engineer has been watching these proceedings and is taking notes. So there are ways to improve the street conditions in the neighborhood, in addition to the improvements that would be required with future development of this site, that the city can actually help effectuate because it does own the property. And before it sells the property, it can set the terms of that sale and future development. We believe the location is exceptional. The frontage onto Boones Ferry Road is not only is it consistent with the Lake Forest Neighborhood Plan and the comprehensive plan in terms of looking at high-density zoning, it does have very good access. And it's access to a complete street that's being upgraded with, as you're well aware, bike, pedestrian, and transit amenities. It's also very close to within walking distance of medical services, retail, offices, and other employment. And that's really a driver of this, is to create workforce housing for our community. Transit services, we all know how great transit is in Lake Oswego. Unfortunately, transit services follow demand. So TriMet is not going to look at enhancing transit service in this part of our community until there's greater population density. So this only supports that. We believe the criteria for public need are met. Additionally, the proposed amendments are consistent with the council direction to pursue affordable housing and their goals for a more inclusive community. We will go into further detail. We'd like to go into further detail in our written rebuttal if the commission would indulge us and allow us to submit written rebuttal. And that concludes our comments. We believe the Planning Commission could recommend approval of the proposed amendments based on the applicable criteria and findings in the staff report, although we would like the opportunity to respond in greater detail in written rebuttal. So thank you for your careful consideration and your service to the community. We're both here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Director Siegel. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Stewart?
Just to confirm, any proposed new development on the site, whether it's housing or whether it's commercial or whatever, would have to go through a separate quasi-judicial hearing with the Development Review Commission. Is that accurate?
That's correct, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Pepe?
So just to be as clear as possible, what is being proposed versus what is current, there is no gain in traffic, no increase in motorized vehicles, e-bikes, whatever, that will negatively impact the neighborhood immediately adjacent to this.
Yeah. The traffic report and the memo that was prepared by Kittleson and Associates compared what uses under the current zoning without housing being allowed in there,
right,
and then compared that to the site with housing and the number of units, the 50 to 52 units that are potentially could locate there. The finding of that report was that the residential trip generation was less than the commercial, the restaurant, and the daycare example that was tested under the current zoning situation. The traffic engineer at Kittleson talked to the city engineer, and they looked at the existing zoning, looked at the various uses within the existing zone, and identified kind of a worst-case scenario under both the current zoning as well as the with the residential zone change. So that was a comparison, and it found that there was fewer trips on a daily basis generated by the residential development.
So if a residential goes in.
I'm sorry?
So if a residential unit or complex goes in to this proposed site.
To the proposed site, okay. Yes, yeah.
There is not a net increase in vehicle traffic.
There is not.
Please, I'd ask the audience to refrain. Please, we keep order.
Was there study to see what the net increase of vehicles were in the neighborhood, whether parked on the side, on the streets?
Let me get the report out here. They looked at the trip generation from the site itself in terms of how many daily trips and then weekday daily trips and then AM peak hour trips and PM peak hour trips would be generated by those two scenarios.
Right.
And that's the comparative and the comparison that that study looked at. That's the requirement of the transportation planning rule and the goal 12 requirement when you're doing a zone change to do that comparative analysis.
And so that only looks at vehicles driving by and or coming directly
generated from the site. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It did not.
It doesn't distinguish.
It didn't. No, it didn't distribute them. Yeah.
Well, and it intentionally separates out the background traffic or trips that are already occurring on the network, right, because you're wanting to examine the impact of that zone change, and that's what they looked at.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lee?
I have two questions. You talked about the ways to improve the road, West Sunset. If this development were to be put in, would the city be improving that road? And how far down the road would the city be paying for that improvement? Or are you suggesting an LID that the neighbors will have to pay for?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Lee. Because right now, we have these code amendments that are before you, and the criteria for those changes are, one set of requirements that we're trying to demonstrate that we believe we meet. The development review application would have to follow. I think that was a question from one of the commissioners earlier. That development review application would be evaluated against the code, and based on the impact of, it could be 50 units, it could be 20 units, it could be 5. We don't know how many units are going to be part of a future development application, but based on the number of units or the impact of the development, the engineering department would determine, again, based on the code, what the street improvement requirements are for that development. And typically, a development of that size is going to be required to do street frontage improvements. And given the condition of Sunset Drive, I wouldn't be surprised to see, roadway, I don't know how much of the roadway, but, a significant portion of the roadway, drainage, sidewalks, street trees,
But only on the area that this property touches.
Well, it depends on the impact, and that's what a traffic impact study would look at, is an actual development application, the impact on the system, how far, based on the city standards, level of service standards and safety and operational standards. We have had development applications that required off-site impacts before, where, you had to do something up the street or put in a traffic signal or,
But it is a big unknown.
It's an unknown because there isn't a development application. I think that's part of what you were hearing earlier, is we want to see a development application. Well, the city's not developing the property. We're trying to prepare it so that those who do develop affordable housing are in a position to actually look at it and consider what should go there.
Okay, and then my second question was the public transit, and I have a copy of the schedule of bus route 37, which doesn't stop close to this property at all, and doesn't run on Saturday and Sundays, and has a very limited schedule, and to assume that TriMet might, down the road, put in a heavier schedule, again, that's another unknown. Would that be correct?
Well, the site is served by TriMet, and I think...
Yeah, it is right now on 37, and it runs on Monday and Friday at 7:21, 9:05, and 4:45.
It runs midweek, and the times I know, having had a business on Boones Ferry Road and having family who operate a business on Boones Ferry Road, the difficulty that they have, and with employees being able to get to and from where they work, and it's not going to get any better, frankly, until there's, TriMet recognizes that this is a corridor that has a population base, that there's workforce needs, that there's connectivity that needs to occur between Bridgeport Village and PCC, and it is part of, we could enter this into the record, as part of TriMet's Southwest Service Enhancement Plan that actually realigns 3 of their routes in Lake Oswego to better serve Boones Ferry Road with more frequent service. I think it's 20-minute or half-hour service, 7 days a week. So it is in TriMet's plan to improve service in this area.
That's what I was going to add. They recently, within the last 5 years, adopted their Southwest Enhancement, Transit Service Enhancement Plan. And today's schedule, it's a snapshot of today, serving the development patterns that are out there today. So there's more opportunity to serve residents and things of that nature, additional transit service would probably follow.
How would we apply for that additional service, or demand it, or get it? I mean, that's a long process too, isn't it?
It's a different conversation.
Yeah.
It's about regional cooperation and partnerships, and I know that our council, the city council, and the city manager have really stepped up, I think, the city's game in terms of...
I guess where I'm going with this is, it's just one more, this could happen, but we don't know it's going to happen, that's all.
Yeah, it is a site that is served by transit.
Yes.
In quotes.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Fisher?
Please, I hope I'm not sounding too stupid, but we've used the word affordable housing, and one of the testifiers before said low-income housing. Is there a difference between the two? And if so, what are we zoning for low income or just density?
Yeah, the city's definition of affordable housing for purposes of financial incentives and other assistance from the city is that it's housing, it's multifamily housing consisting of at least 20 units, where at least 10% of those units are affordable to those households earning not more than 80% of the area median income, if you're following me on that. So 80% is a common threshold where housing providers and housing assistance programs, including low-income housing tax credits and other, they look at 80% as a threshold. The Metro Regional Housing Bond is looking at the whole range of affordability from very low to low, which would be 80%.
And I believe in our original presentation, we indicated that 80% of the area median income was about $74,000 for a family of four, which is about the starting salary of a Lake Oswego firefighter.
Thank you, Frank. And I believe all of this information is in the record.
It is, yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pepe?
You indicated that the city is not in talks with anybody right now as far as anybody of interest that wants to purchase this property, and the city is not in the business of wanting to develop it themselves, right?
The city has an intergovernmental agreement or a memorandum of understanding with Metro and the Housing Authority of Clackamas County to initiate this process that we're in now, to explore the possibility of making the property, preparing the site for potential housing development. The city is not under contract. No one has an option to build anything on it. The city council still has full control over, the future disposition of this property.
Okay. So with that being the case, is there a known or a estimated or perceived value of the property if this proposal were to go through or if it doesn't? What is that estimated delta?
Yeah, so Commissioner Pepe, I'm not really in a position I haven't researched that, and it's not really, it's not, I guess, germane to the criteria, but I will respond to, some of the testimony was the city is just trying to improve its financial position or is using this process to, purely from an economic perspective, and that, the highest and best use of this property from an economic perspective is probably not low-income housing. It would be something else. So on the other hand, the property does have value, and the city and its fiduciary, responsibility will look at that and will balance that when they decide the future disposition of the property.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other questions? Director Siegel, I had one question. If I understood your testimony, you were mentioning that access could be provided off of Boones Ferry. But is that, I was just wondering, I thought that our development code said that where neighborhood access was possible, then, access had to be provided. Am I remembering the code correctly, or how does the access apply here?
Well, I may have to defer to the deputy city attorney on the actual code language, but as I recall, the Westlake Grove Design District has an access and circulation plan. It's very specific, site-specific access and circulation plans that do show access to Boones Ferry Road from this property, as well as the requirement to plan for a future connection to the adjacent parcels to the west, only for such time that they might redevelop in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't understand. Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Stewart?
Just to piggyback on that, access though from Boones Ferry would be right in, right out, right? Because there's a median there.
There is a median in there, so the city engineer would evaluate that at the time a development application is before the city.
Right.
Commissioner Lee?
Does affordable housing get a preferential tax treatment versus if it would go forward as a commercial development with retail and condos above or whatever?
That's typically, if it's public public housing or, that's really outside of my area of expertise, to be honest with you. But, and I think Frank is saying the same thing. So, the tax advantage or disadvantage is really not, I'm sorry to say, but it's not really germane to your decision or your recommendation.
And I guess I'm confused. It's public housing, but a developer is going to build it. And who's going to own it?
Right. So those are all details for the city council and the respective elected bodies with, the county or whichever agencies the city council decides to work with in issuing a solicitation for development proposals. They will specify, they will determine who the what the, proposal requirements are, what kind of development or developer they're interested in receiving proposals from. And there are developers, there are nonprofit housing developers who produce affordable housing. There are market rate builders who have been known to build below market rate housing. There are also public agencies like the Housing Authority that builds housing, but I don't think they're looking at this site as a housing authority property, just because they tend to manage larger properties.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the question before, of course, the commission is the use of the property, not the ownership.
Commissioners, any other questions? I see none. So I did understand that the applicant wishes to file final written argument. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair.
Mr. Chair, before we go to that point of Commissioner Leek, have you reviewed since you were not present at the previous meeting, have you reviewed the tape of the statements and the evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. All right.
Excuse me.
So this is the time, since we have a bifurcated hearing, this is the close of the oral rebuttal to the oral testimony. Okay? So now the question is whether any person, and that's the applicant, any other person, wishes an opportunity to file written rebuttal evidence to the new written evidence that was submitted between July 13 and today at noon, I believe. Does any person request that opportunity? I see a hand in the back. I see two hands in the back. This is not an auction. Okay. All right, so we have two. So we have, I guess for the record, can I, at least your name?
My name is Helen Tricky Bradley.
Okay, Helen Turkey Bradley, Tricky, excuse me, not an auctioneer, obviously, has requested the opportunity to submit written rebuttal evidence, and that would be any person can then submit written rebuttal evidence to the new evidence that was submitted in writing. That's G131 through G137 and G254 through G256, whatever came in that period after the close of the last meeting. And I want to be crystal clear that the written rebuttal evidence should not stray over into rebutting oral testimony that was previously given. I mean, we're looking at just the written materials that were submitted in the last 2 weeks to do that, all right? So having that, did you have any questions? Okay. So we have that request, and by statute, we have to grant it, so there's that. I'll pause for just, let's go ahead. So the commission needs to set the date by which the written rebuttal evidence must be received. The commission is, the Development Review Commission does all of the quasi-judicial land use hearings, that sort of thing. It's quite, used to it. So typically what happens is that once the time for submitting new evidence is closed, they then designate like 2 days to submit written rebuttal evidence. And let me just go on, I guess, and say, as you just decide what your time frame is for receiving written rebuttal evidence, is if the applicant requests to submit a final written argument, which does not include new evidence, the applicant, by the statute, is given 7 days, not less than 7 days, to file that final written argument. So a hypothetical would be to set for the close of business on Wednesday, that'd be the 14th, that'd be 2 days, like the DRC, close on business Wednesday, and then that would mean that if the applicant requests a final written argument, the opportunity to submit that, they have 7 days, so that would be the 21st, close of Wednesday on the 21st. That would then give staff Thursday to gather it up together in a package for you and then get it out to you on Friday before your meeting on the 26th. So what I'm saying is 2 days is about it, 3 at the most for final written rebuttal evidence, or for written rebuttal evidence based upon that scheduling.
Thank you, Attorney Boone. One comment. I think earlier it was mentioned that the meeting was held July 13th. Just for a point, the previous meeting was June 13th.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
that's the correct, yeah.
June 14th.
June 14th.
June 14th.
Thank you for that correction.
May I ask a question or clarification, a point of order, I guess? In our rebuttal, I referred to a document that's not in the record, the TriMet Southwest Service Enhancement Plan. How do we approach that? Should that, I mean, I've given information about it. Yeah. Is that required to be entered into the record, and then the public have an opportunity to?
It's the TriMet, it's the TriMet plan.
TriMet Southwest Service Enhancement Plan.
Okay. And that was, I think you have testified what you think it says, and you can amplify on that in your final written argument. In terms of, is it new evidence? I mean, it's not rebuttal. I don't know whether it's rebuttal evidence, whether that be rebuttal evidence to any written material that was submitted. If it was, then it could be.
I was just rebutting what someone had testified this evening.
Right. It's not an order by the council. It's not a city act, so the commission is not able to take administrative notice of it. Okay. So I think it should be submitted prior to close here if you want to do that. Okay. And I suppose you can do that. I mean, if you can get that filed
right now.
Yeah, get that filed right now. That'd be great. Okay. And then people, that would be in the record, and people have an opportunity to rebut that in the written rebuttal period. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Just a question on the point of order that the applicant was making. Earlier tonight, Commissioner Leek did give testimony on Exhibit G 254, which showed the TriMet schedule. Would that not be a rebuttal to?
Well, this is an enhancement plan. Okay. It's a different plan, different material, different evidence that Director Siegel was asking about.
I was rebutting the information about the schedule that was submitted.
Yeah.
Oh, it was submitted with written testimony before.
G24.
Well, okay,
G24,
so that was with the written
254.
material. Then I'm sorry, if that is in rebuttal to the written schedule, then yes, that would come in because that was part of the new written evidence that came in.
So it would come in during the rebuttal period that you're offering
Right,
to
during
everyone.
the 2-day rebuttal period.
Okay, thank you.
So 2 days.
Sorry, I didn't link the two.
And then to your question, Attorney Boone, I think the commission, and they can comment on if there's any disagreement, but would recommend for Wednesday, July 14th, the 2 days for a rebuttal, followed by the applicant having submitted their rebuttal by the 21st close of business, which would allow for the Thursday and Friday before a 26th meeting. So the hypothetical that you were outlining, I think, seems to make sense to make our meetings work, and the commission would like to recommend that. Is there any disagreement among the commissioners?
I would prefer a motion to set those dates and times, set the dates.
Okay.
So moved.
So it'd be close of business on Wednesday for any written rebuttal evidence, and close of business July 21 for any written final argument, which cannot include any new evidence.
Correct, and just for point of clarification, it's Wednesday, July 14th, and 2 days from.
Oh, okay, Wednesday, July 14, 2 days from now, and then Wednesday, July 21 for written final argument.
Correct.
Okay.
So is a motion to approve that? Any discussion on the motion? None?
Second.
All those a second on the motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Any abstains? None. Unanimous.
All right, then the hearing is continued for the receipt of these additional written materials. And then at the next meeting, the commission would move directly into deliberations. There'd be no opportunity for testimony.
Thank you. So that concludes.
Just a point of order. Do we have to take the names of the people who want to submit? We only have one person.
No. Any person can trigger that period. Any person, okay, applicant, anybody can now submit written rebuttal evidence within this 2-day period. Okay.
And that's rebuttal to the content that was submitted between
the last 2 weeks in written materials only. This G131 through G137 and 254 through 256. And I've just talked. I'm sorry, just to be transparent here. I talked with the clerk Iris McCaleb to give me those exhibit dates. It's whenever material came in on July 13, which would be the day after the close of the last hearing. June 14. Okay. June 14th? Okay, June 15th. Thank you. June 15th through today. Okay.
Thank you, Iris.
Yes.
All right. No further questions. Thanks for everyone who came and gave testimony tonight. So we will meet next time at our next meeting, July 26th. Excuse me, the next meeting after that, which is, I'm slipping my dates. What is it? August 9th, yeah. Will be our next Plan Commission meeting. So thanks for everyone coming and testifying tonight. We'll move on in the agenda. Next is on the agenda is other business. We did have business to select the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee Planning Commission Liaison. This is a recommendation to the mayor to serve. We did have an earlier recommendation, but through the changing of our commission members, we needed to select a new commission liaison. So it's my understanding we did receive one commissioner who volunteered, Commissioner Leek. Are there any other commissioners who would wish to nominate to serve on the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee? We see none. And could we make a motion to approve Commissioner Leek as the Middle Housing Commission Advisory Code Planning Commission Liaison?
I think technically it's to recommend to the mayor for appointment.
Sorry. Yeah, is there a motion to recommend to the mayor Commissioner Leek as our Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee Planning Commission liaison?
I make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None? Any abstains? No? The one abstain, Commissioner Leek? No, you're good. Okay, all in favor, yeah. Oh, it's unanimous. So thank you. Yeah, thanks Commissioner Leek for serving. And then next on the agenda is schedule review. Director Siegel, would you like to give us a schedule update?
Thank you, Chair Heap. Your next regularly scheduled meeting is on July 26th, and that's when you've scheduled, I guess, the conclusion of the hearing that you just conducted. You also have a work session scheduled on the flood hazard management overlay. And that's it on the 26th. On the 9th of August, tentatively, you may be adopting findings for the hearing held tonight. There's no other business scheduled that evening, so Chair, just let me know if there's something that you want to take up that evening. Later into August, it's looks like both dates in August are open. So just let us know what your pleasure is there. And
could you repeat what the 26th is again?
Yeah, July 26th is a work session, second work session actually, on an update to the flood management overlay, which are the regulations that implement FEMA requirements for floodplains. Yeah. And that concludes the schedule update.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? None? Then that's it for tonight. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for everyone who came out and gave testimony tonight. Really appreciate it. And we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.